Welcome back to the Hope Global Forum. I'm John Hope Bryant, founder of Operation Hope, resetting a nation, resetting America, healing our souls and healing a nation, opportunity for all. I could be talking about this forum, I could be talking about the NFL because the NFL and that shield is embedded in our spirit. And I'm about to introduce somebody who really could do this session all by himself. He's that cool, he's that comfortable, and he's that courageous. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing formally my friend Roger Goodell, the commissioner for the NFL. He's the 8th chief executive officer of the NFL, having recently completed his 100th season. Under Commissioner Goodell's leadership, the NFL has focused on improvements to player health and safety, benefits for retired players, thank you, the league's personal conduct policy, expanding social responsibility initiatives, and diversity in hiring practices. None of that explains Roger Goodell. It does explain what he's been up to, some of it. Roger is one of those people you want to hug, not shake their hands when you see him, which makes this difficult, this moment we're in now, really tough. But he's got this sharp intellect, but this warm spirit. You just feel immediately like he's your friend, and he's not playing a game with you. He's authentic. And I also like that Roger doesn't tell you what you want to hear. If Roger likes you and believes in you, he'll tell you. If he thinks you're full of mess, he'll tell you that too, which probably got him in some trouble. But it also gives you more credibility because people know where you stand. We've got a partnership together, the NFL and Operation Hope. They selected us to be part of their economic empowerment agenda well before the issue with George Floyd and his social justice reckoning. He was ahead of schedule, ahead of where the nation was. And then when all this happened, well, even before this happened, they renewed the commitment because they thought it was so important. And I want to give Jed York some credit for being the first team within the NFL to match what was being done at the national level. But really, Roger, in some ways, spiritually and emotionally, this is one of the most important conversations I could have with any leader, because the National Football League is embedded into the soul and the psyche of America herself. And it's the one. Let me stop, by the way. That's the coolest office. I thought that Dan Schulman's office was cool enough. I'm just going to come. I don't know. We're not going to lunch at a restaurant. When we can find a meeting, I'm coming to your office.
John, you're welcome right here. And I just want to make sure, first, thank you for your really nice comments. I want to make sure all of the listeners today realize that I am not 100 years old, okay? The league is 100 years old. I have not been here that entire time in this office, but I've been privileged to be there when we celebrate our 100th birthday, as you mentioned, and right. It's a thrill to be here with you today, too, John, as always.
Yeah, no, honored to have you with us. And you're sitting really in a moment in history, and you have this 400-year-old social justice reckoning for Black America. You have a global health pandemic with COVID-19. We have this economic crisis, all three of which has affected your brand, your business, your players. You got to think about all that with folks in the stands and communities you serve. But as I go back to my original comment, the NFL is in many ways the soul of this country, and or shares the soulfulness of this country. And it's the one place where sports, where people could come together, black and white, rich and poor, a billionaire next to a millionaire, next to somebody trying to buy some air, Republicans and Democrats. And everybody would get along for a few hours, rooting, at least on that side of the stadium, for the same team. And you now find yourself in a more complicated world. Why did you think that it was important to lean into the moment versus just standing back and letting the moment pass you by? Do you see the NFL as part of the soul of this country and playing a role in our healing?
John, I've always looked at the National Football League as a unifier. To your point, we bring people together, and people from different backgrounds, whether it's on the field, in our locker rooms, or whether it's our fan base, which is 200 million people. Wow. And so we have to play that role, and we want to play that role. And I've always said to our staff and to our membership and to our players, really, that we are in a leadership position, and we accept that with humility, but also the responsibility that comes with that, to make sure that we're doing things the right way. I don't think today's world that we're living in, you mentioned all the things that are going on around us, I don't think anyone, either as an individual, as a corporation, or an organization, can sit back and not lean in and not help make the world a better place. We all need to, and we all have to do what we can. Certain people can do certain things really well. Certain organizations can do well. Yeah. I know the National Football League has made a difference in our history at various stages. We've helped heal our nation after 2001, 9/11. We certainly have played a role in different parts of our history, and I think we will be seen that way again as we work through these challenges that we're going through right now. And we will be better off. We will come through this better. But all of us are going to have to find a way to contribute to that, to make that happen. And we have a saying around here, it takes all of us. And I believe that. It takes all of us.
This is certainly not a popularity contest sometimes, leadership. As I think about good leaders, Abraham Lincoln did not have a popularity contest. He barely got elected. And he had people who loved him and people, of course, who meant him harm. And then you can fast forward to, Madam C.J. Walker, all the sort of the heroes and sheroes of the civil rights movement. You go to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., my mentor, Ambassador Young. I mean, Ambassador Young became mayor. His friends picketed him at the city hall the day after he was elected. His friends. Yep. You have Dr. King would show up at a city, at an airport. The mayor wouldn't meet him. The people I just mentioned that when he got the Nobel Peace Prize, the business community in Atlanta didn't want to honor him. Other members of the civil rights community resented him or were jealous of him. He couldn't win. But he knew he was doing the right thing. And of course, history has treated him well. You don't have the benefit of hindsight. You're in the middle of it. And let's just talk about the elephant in the room, because I know you're comfortable with every conversation. You had players who took a knee. You had Colin Kaepernick. You had this social movement within the ranks of the NFL that was really really in many ways a signal of challenges to come. Mm-hmm. Let me give my context on this, and then you can amplify or disagree or whatever in way you want. But as a black man myself, coming from Compton, California, and being homeless in South Central, I always think about all those I left behind in what we call the hood, the neighborhood. My guess is there are a lot of players got these contracts. They're basically, gladiator celebrities today. They're rock stars in their communities and around the world. They have these contracts. They're successful, but they feel they've left all their problems and all their friends and family behind, and they can't help them. They can't bring them in the locker room. They can't bring them into their net worth. And I feel that taking a knee, for lack of a better description, when they saw this injustice happening, was almost the only thing they thought they could do to bring attention to a problem that was affecting so many. They didn't know what else to do. They didn't have any other tools to use, which is why I think this economic piece that you're doing now and other things, giving people something to do meaningfully is so important. But let me back up. Do you think I hit that right, that this was something that...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I hit you. You hit it exactly right. People forget that our players are human beings. They come from communities. They come from families. They are fathers, their brothers, their sons. They're human beings, and they are remarkable human beings. Not just for what they do on the field. What I admire most about our players is not the skills on the field; it's the men that they are. Yeah. It's more than I have a responsibility back to my community. they care deeply about it, John. They with their heart and soul. And when Colin and Eric Reed and Kenny Stills and Anquan Bolden and Malcolm Jenkins, all players, and going back to 2014, our players have always stood up and brought attention to issues that need focus and need attention. And they have that platform, and they used it. And I admired that. And that started a really important dialogue that really helped a lot of us understand better what's going on in those communities. I, for one, I'm first to say it, it's hard to imagine some of the things that we've seen played out on our screens. We see it on video now, but listening to our players, I felt it. I went with them on ride-alongs. I went with them into the communities. I went to a bail hearing, and we really had an opportunity to understand, is our system, there are lots of things wrong with the system, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's only wrong if we sit and we accept that and don't do something to change it. And so that was a commitment we made several years ago with our players, is to work with the Players Coalition and to help fund their efforts, as well as efforts of many great organizations like yours, John.
Thank you.
And also really be focused on those 4 key pillars, really, which was economic advancement, education, policing and communities, and criminal justice reform. All of those things that's where our focus has been. But we've also gone beyond that, John, and you've seen it playing out right now. It was one of the things the players really wanted to do, and a focus for them last summer was, how do we get people out to vote? Everybody has a vote.
Aren't you using your stadiums as polling places?
We are. We're using 16 of our stadiums. We offered all of them, all 30 of them. But the various entities would have to approve that in each community. But 16 of our stadiums will be used as polling places, sometimes while games are going on, by the way.
Wow.
But we think that that's great, because what we're trying to do is encourage America to participate and to be part of the solution by exercising your vote. That's our given right as Americans, and we all need to do it. And so we have been working to register people to come out. We've been working to educate them so that they have the best information to make a choice however they wish, and to go ahead and go to the polls and actually pull the levers and make sure that they're doing it. But I want to make one other point here. It's not just this election. It's just not a presidential election. Really, some of the most impactful elections, as you know, particularly when you get into criminal justice reform and policing, those things are really, to a large extent, done locally.
Yep.
So the mayor and the county executive and maybe sometimes the governor, but those things are really important for us to be involved with, to understand what's on the ballot, get involved, and make sure that we're putting people in place that are going to drive the things that we believe in.
I'm getting almost more questions from the floor for you than anybody else. I'm trying to respond to not only what I wanted to ask you, but some of these questions. And one of them is, what do you say to those fans who want the players to stop, who wanted the players or want the players to stop kneeling and to just stop talking about social justice and just play? I mean, again, being you must be like Chinese water torture or something, or like ready fire, herding cats. You can't make it. There's no way to make everybody happy. How did you respond to that?
It just goes back to your point about leadership. To me, I don't come in here every day and sit at this desk to try to make people happy. What I do is try to do the right thing.
That's right. And
try to do what's right for not just the NFL, but for our communities that we live in. And so for me, our players have a voice. They have a platform. They should exercise that. I want to make it clear to everybody who may be listening here, I certainly understand those who come to watch a football game. But remember here, these are men that have families and have been impacted directly by these issues who are bringing attention to that. They are not, and I want to be really clear with this, they're not being unpatriotic.
That's right.
This is not against the flag.
That's right.
These young men care deeply about what's happening in their community, and this is the attention they're trying to bring it to it. But more importantly, it goes beyond the attention, John. As you know, bringing attention to an issue and not having an impact on the change that's needed to get us to a better place in our communities and our society and is really sort of a lost opportunity. So these guys are committed. It's not just what we're doing, the Players Coalition, and committing, the $250 million over 10 years and,
right.
and the work that we're doing, that all the attention we're bringing to it through Inspire Change. It's actually being there and meeting with legislators, meeting with mayors, meeting with chiefs of police, and really effectuating change on a local level that is making our communities better. And that's what makes me proud. And we're doing it with the players and the league and the clubs and the owners, everyone pulling together, and along with great partners that we have as part of our social change, that really we are leading ourselves to a better place. And we're trying to do our part and more. And I think all of us have to do more.
This issue of taking a knee, I think that the players I've spoken to see this as not only not being patriotic, they actually think they're being very patriotic. They think that they're living up to the creed of the very values that America and her founders were founded on, and the Bill of Rights, the really the vaulted values of our Constitution, the soaring rhetoric of freedom and justice for all. And Dr. King and Ambassador Andrew Young, who is here, his aide, the only living aide still with us in the world, they would consciously disobey what they thought were unjust laws. They notified the sheriff before they showed up. They weren't trying to create trouble. They said, we're coming to town. We're going to protest civil disobedience. We're not going to make any trouble, but we are going to make ourselves known, and we're going to take a knee. We're going to sit down. We're going to protest. We're going to sit in because we think that attention needs to be directed toward this injustice. It's an unjust law, X, Y, and Z, having separate water fountains or whatever the thing was at that time. But they fully expected they would be arrested. They fully expected that the local courts would prosecute them. And they just believed that by the time it got to the Supreme Court, that Supreme thought would take heed, and they were right about that. And they also got the media's attention. But it was designed to bring out the best in us, Roger. But rainbows only follow storms. You cannot have a rainbow without a storm first. So I think that if people would just step back for a minute, they can see that these players had good intentions. We can argue about whether it's the right strategy, but it was the best of intentions. And now taking a knee is being, I believe, replaced with taking a position and taking back their communities. Can you talk a little bit about the Inspire Change initiative and what you're doing there?
Yeah, John, because when we're demonstrating, we're bringing attention to things that need to be addressed and that things that are wrong. And I think the thing that individuals, organizations all struggle with, okay, what do we do to help?
Right.
How do we help lead to that change that we all want?
Right.
We all want to stop racism. We all want to stop oppression of people. We all want to provide opportunities and bring equality to everybody in our communities. How do we do it? And so our effort was to come under this banner of Inspire Change, which is our efforts not just to partner with others who are doing great work in those communities, but bring attention to the great things that are happening in our communities, the things that aren't so great in our communities, but inspire us all to try to be part of that change, part of that movement to make a better community. And, we have that platform, and that's really important for us to use that. Our players will do it, but we really want to go back to the fact that we have to go beyond the demonstrations and go into actually doing the hard work in communities. And that's what our players are doing. That's what makes me so proud. Yeah. Our players, our owners, the league, we're all going in and we're trying to make changes in our communities that are, to me, are sustainable, they're impactful, and they are incredibly needed in our communities. If you go in there and you see it, you go to a bail bond hearing, you just can't believe your eyes.
Yeah.
You can't believe what you're watching, and that's not justice. And so, how do we effectuate that? We're a football league, but it's going to community leaders and talking about what can we do to make a better system.
Yeah, oftentimes today, justice feels like just us. And to rationalize is to tell rational lies. And we've got to find a different way to operate because, as I've said earlier, blaming your problems on your neighbor doesn't solve any of your problems or even make you any richer. You're no better off. And it doesn't solve, it just makes things worse. So we've got to become better neighbors and see that we're all bound up together. Racism is just bad for business. Be honest, it's bad for your heart. It's bad for business.
There's no place for it, period.
There's no place for it, period.
And same with hate. And we've talked about it a little bit in our time, but I grew up in Washington, D.C. in the 60s. My dad was in the Senate at the time. And, I saw what was going on with the civil rights movement. I saw what's going on with the anti-war movements. And I would walk home from school and there'd be police and, authorities all over the streets. What's different today to me, John, though, is that it's everyone pulling together. White people, black people, brown people, Asian people. Everybody's sort of saying, this is not right.
Yeah.
We got to fix it. And frustrations of why we haven't to date. And so I really believe we're at a moment here where real change is going to happen, and we want to be part of that.
As we wrap up, with the last couple of minutes we have here together, Roger, I admire your courage, man. You remind me of something. There's a couple of things I'd like to say. I'd rather you respect me and learn to like me than like me and never respect me, number one. Number two, talk without being offensive, listen without being defensive, and always leave even your adversary with their dignity. If you don't, they'll spend the rest of their life trying to make you miserable. You seem to apply both of those things to your life. You just sort of brush things off, and you rise above continually, even when you're not being treated fairly. Where does that inner constitution come from in you? Where did you get your sense of fairness and decency and fair play? Why do you care so much about somebody who is in a different socioeconomic state than you? You don't need this job. You don't need to do this. You can leave it tomorrow. Why? Why bother?
Well, a couple of things. I go back to my parents. I think that's my foundation. I've just been really fortunate to have wonderful people around me. I lost both my parents way too early, but they were incredible influences on me. And my father, I'll tell you this story quickly, was a U.S. Senator. He replaced Bobby Kennedy in the 60s when he was assassinated. And he decided to come out against the Vietnam War. And that was one of his first acts because he frankly had heard this from many college students going around New York State and Cornell in particular. And I remember him coming home and sitting all of us, and I'm one of 5 boys, John, and sat with my mother and my father. And my dad explained he's going to introduce legislation to end the Vietnam War. He was a liberal Republican. He knew that he would get a negative reaction from President Nixon. I think he underestimated that reaction, by the way. And they came after him. And he said, I will lose the election in 70 because of this.
Wow.
And he loved public service. He loved being a United States Senator. He loved being in Congress. He was 9 years in the House before that. But he did it because it was right. And he introduced that legislation, and it's proven to be right. And from that moment on, I understood that you have to do things on principle. You have to the courage to do things that are right, regardless of the consequences. Whether you lose your job or you lose your position, that's not important. What's important is you do the right thing. And so that was really the foundation for me that drives me every day here. I also have a really deep belief in this institution, the National Football League. I believe in the power that it has to change lives for the better. Just playing this season, John, as an example. we've worked really hard in the off season to change everything we do, to adapt, to do it safely for everybody, from players to coaches to our personnel to our fans. And we had to do that, and you had to throw everything up upside down and do it again.
Yeah.
And, playing was a part of that message that we can live with this virus. We can operate effectively with the virus. We can bring some normalcy, and the NFL does represent some of that. So there was a piece of that the players and the NFL coming together to try to do that was an important message, particularly as we're going through all the other challenges, whether they're economic or social, and what we can do. This gives us a platform to continue to try to make an impact on that. And so this season, 2020, coming after our 100th last year where we celebrated our history, we said we knew the future would be different. I'm not sure we ever would have imagined it was going to be quite so different in 2020. But it's been a real growth period for us and a learning period for us to show we can do things we didn't imagine, and we can do things that can have a real impact on people. And it may be some of the proudest days I've had being commissioner of the NFL is seeing how we've elevated ourselves and really tried to do something great for our country and for people around the world.
My team's telling me that I can ask you another question, maybe two. So if you're good.
You're the boss, John.
No, actually I'm not. But I'm glad it looks that way. But this is such an important conversation, Roger, and very, very few chances to have these candid conversations with no agendas, and people can relax and really just have a heart-to-heart with our fellow men and women. To hopefully role model leadership. This is what leadership should look like, and decency. Going back to 68, I didn't know this. Your dad replaced Bobby Kennedy. Was 68? Dr. King was assassinated?
Correct. April 4th.
In fact, Andrew Young was on that balcony. He's right here. Ambassador Young was on that balcony with Dr. King pointing to the shooter in Memphis. Bobby Kennedy was assassinated 2 years before that, I think. Kennedy was assassinated. 4
years.
4 years ago. 4 years before that. We were rocked with social upheaval, questionings of our own integrity, who we are. It must have been an incredibly tough period. How old were you then?
68. I was 9 years old.
9 years old. Okay, so you remember this.
Oh yeah.
How did your dad deal with taking on this mantle in this time and turning it into something positive? Because you couldn't be obsessed with being liked or popular, particularly get the bills that he introduced. You had to root in your principles. By the way, you now make perfect sense to me. I understand why you do the right thing because you saw it. But what was that moment like with your dad?
Well, I think it was hard because, again, being a United States Senator was really important to him, but it wasn't as important as not doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. And he didn't want to be in the Senate if he didn't speak up. He didn't think that was his role. He thought his role was to listen to the people, to do the best he could to lead and to go in and represent the state of New York. And to me, he did that. And he did it knowing the consequences. Yeah. For me, watching it, as young as I was, I really did see that. It was very clear to me. Yeah. And to hear people criticize my father, again, we're 5 boys in 7 years. Yeah. The Goodell boys fight. And when we fight each other, but if somebody attacks our own, we fight even harder.
All the way to school and all the way back home.
That's correct. And so I will protect anybody, but when you attack my brother, I'm coming after you. But my point is, we cared deeply about my father and my mother, and we saw the pain and difficulty, but they still did it. And I think they did it in part to show us how to live a life, and to live a life of decency, a life of doing the right thing, and, risking things. You can't sit and be safe. And today's, we've talked about a little bit here today. It is not a time to sit and be safe.
That's right.
It's a time to stand up, walk it out there, and make sure you make a difference every day. And I think that's just something that was born in me, and I guess I just had great mentors in life, and I still do. People like you, people who they send you that little message at any given moment that just picks you up and says, we're doing the right thing and working together. I always like to say football is about teamwork.
Yeah.
And that's what we need is teamwork. We need to come together, work together, and make a difference because the challenges are pretty extraordinary.
Yes. But
I do believe we can meet them. And the only way we're going to do that is together.
You make perfect sense to me, Roger. If I had to rename this session, I would say I'd name it the Goodell Brothers Fight. And we fight. You fight for justice. You fight for goodness. You fight, but most of all, you fight for your brother or your sister who's getting beat up next to you, who may not be able to fight for themselves. And that's really what you're doing every day. You're fighting for justice. You're fighting for the underdog. You're fighting for those who are unseen. You're fighting for those who are unheard. And people may not understand it, but they can appreciate it. And one day they will.
They're fighting for people who don't have a voice, John. Listen, we all are very fortunate in some ways, but there are a lot of people out there who aren't as fortunate and aren't getting the things that they need. And we have to do our best to try to help. And that's what we're going to do.
You inspire me, my friend. Let me let you get back to the good fight under the shield of the NFL there. Thanks for spending this time with us at the Hope Global Forum. Thanks for being a change in the world. And I'm honored to be your partner and your friend.
Well, I am too. Thanks for the partnership, but more importantly, the friendship. So thanks for having me.